Welcome to the 30-Minute Hour. It's the personal development podcast for entrepreneurs who are looking to level up and become unstoppable. I'm your host, Eric Twiggs, your procrastination prevention partner. Joining me as always, you know him as the super CEO, the business strategist extraordinaire, and all-around good guy, Ted Fells.
Happy Monday, Eric. Happy Monday.
It is once again a happy Monday. We're talking about failure today, even though it's a happy Monday, right, Ted? It's a little strange.
That's strange.
You wouldn't say happy and failure at the same time normally.
Yeah.
But today you will, because it's all in your perspective. This morning we did a Thank God It's Monday. You need to go back and check it out on shifting your focus on failure. A lot of people have the wrong perspective of failure, so it ends up causing them to fear failure as opposed to really using it as fuel, which is what we're going to talk about today. So it's going to be a good show. Make sure you fasten your seatbelt. But unfortunately, I don't think we warned Dave that this is not your everyday podcast.
It's not your everyday podcast, Dave.
He may have witnessed it backstage.
That's it.
He witnessed the two of us talking, so he said, "You know what? I may be in some trouble here," but we didn't warn him officially.
That's it. Because we kind of do things a little different here, Dave. Like one thing I will say, Dave, you'll never win a vote. You'll never win a vote here. Just know it. Like, we're always going to have you outnumbered, so you just got to go with it. You just got to go with it.
Now, this isn't too different than sitting around the dinner table at the firehouse. So
That's right.
It's pretty fun backstage. So I'm imagining this will be pretty awesome.
That's right.
Absolutely. And again, we have quite a few of you watching us live on Facebook. You can also watch us live on LinkedIn and YouTube. And you can also go back and listen to this episode on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and any of those places where you like to consume content. So today we're going to be talking about how to transition your failure into fuel. Or how to transform your failure into fuel. That's going to be the theme for our show today. And I'm excited about introducing our guest. He's got this great book that I'm going to tell you about here. We'll have him talk about it. He is a retired fire department battalion chief. He's the author of the book Fireproof, which we'll get into here in a bit. He's a motivational speaker, coach, mentor. He owns and operates David Hollenbach Consulting, LLC, and he's the host of the popular podcast From Embers to Excellence. That's an awesome name for a podcast, by the way. From Embers to Excellence. Please join me in welcoming to the 30-Minute Hour podcast, David Hollenbach.
Oh, man. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Man, welcome. It's truly an honor to have you on the show with us. You got a really interesting story. I want to get into it, but first I do want to give people a backdrop, and give them some perspective as far as how you got to this point. So you were, like we said, a firefighter for 23 years. So what was it that led you down this path and caused you to choose this as a profession?
Well, I grew up in the fire department. My dad was a firefighter. I sat on my first fire engine when I was probably 3 or 4 years old. And, there's pictures of me sliding down the fire pole at my dad's first fire station. And that was one of those things that you experience as a child, and it just wasn't really even a question. It just seemed like that was the natural progression for me. I wanted to follow in my dad's footsteps. Out of high school, I joined the Navy. My dad had done the same thing. I broke my leg within the first year of my enlistment and was medically discharged. So When I got out, I used my GI Bill to finish my associate's degree in fire science. Went to the fire academy, got my EMT certification, and got picked up by a pretty large metropolitan fire department, and had most of my professional growth and personal growth was during my career in the fire service.
Wow.
Okay. So if you could go back and talk to that younger rookie firefighter version of yourself, what advice would you give to your younger self based off of what you know now?
Well, this is it's funny because right before I left the fire department, I was examining these very thoughts. And one of the things that I sign in each one of my books, it's on the back of my t-shirt. It's just something that I try and keep in the front of my mind every day, because in my early probationary period time, my rookie year, I could have used this mantra: be humble or be humbled. I was pretty cocky. I was really, I thought I was really good at my job, but I made a lot of mistakes in my personal life. And of course I made mistakes as a probationary firefighter. Everybody makes mistakes. But another thing that I would say is you're more resilient than you think. Many times I felt very isolated. I would tell myself, that you're not alone. There's people that are feeling just like you right now. Don't feel like you're alone, because if you just open up, or if you just talk to somebody, other people are experiencing some of the very same things. Another thing is, and this was a piece of wisdom that was shared with me later on when I had a really big growth opportunity. That's what I'll term failure right now. Really big growth opportunity. It's not the mistakes that you make, it's what you do with that experience that defines you. So, what are you going to do with that failure? Are you going to allow the failure to define you, or are you going to allow it to refine you, make you better? And if you get up and you take whatever lesson that experience taught you and use it to make yourself better, then it's no longer a failure. You can mark that on the win side, because you learned something and you're better for having gone through it, and you got up.
Now that's interesting. Did you find that when you were younger, you had a hard time overcoming failures? You found like you were defined by the mistakes you made?
Yeah, I had a chip on my shoulder for quite a few years for different reasons. I made mistakes, and I was immature. A lot of times I felt like, it was other people that were doing things against me, or, it wasn't my fault. But as I matured, whether it was my fault or not, it's my responsibility to deal with it, to respond to whatever environment that I'm in an appropriate way. And if you're going to have a victim mentality, then you're going to be a victim. And I got to a point where, I was like, I can't allow this to run my life. I was struggling with depression. I talk about PTSD in my book, and I've got a lot of experience with that. I worked in some really, really busy firehouses, saw some horrific things, and my hat's off to those guys that tough it out for 30 years and say, no, Never had any issue with it. I'd say bullshit, but can I say that?
Well, it is a family show, but
Well, yeah.
but you,
There goes our Toys R Us sponsor. There we go. Yeah, we had him right there on the hook, Dave, and then you said that, it's all right. It's all right. Keep going.
All right.
No,
So I would say baloney. But,
more acceptable.
And it's not just the fire service, that, people experience horrific things every day. It could be the neighborhood that you grow up in is rough, and you see some horrible things, or the experiences in your household are horrible. And the idea is that there are things that you can do to overcome that. You don't have to live an isolated life. You don't have to live like all that stuff is your fault. Life, and this is actually, I think, Eric, you might have said this on my show. Life is happening for us, not to us. And I don't know. That's one of those things where it's hard when you're in the pit of depression, or you've made some really big mistakes that have affected other people. Even if you affected the lives of people that are really important in your life, you can really come down on yourself hard. If you allow yourself to stay in that spot, that's where you're going to stay. You don't have to stay there. You can make things right. It's possible. I've done it.
No, that's great, and it's good that you've gained that perspective. This kind of leads into my next question about Fireproof. The book is Fireproof: Your Grand Strategy for Transforming Failure into Fuel for Your Future. So, talk more about some of the things that inspired you to write this book.
Well, the book actually started as a leadership book. I started writing it after the death of my brother in 2010. His passing was a really dark time in my life. It was the biggest loss I had ever experienced to that date, and it put me in a really bad place mentally, and I wanted to do something. I had to shift my mindset and use that energy, because there was a lot of negative energy. I wanted to use it to do something good. And so I did. I started writing this book. I developed a leadership program for the department, became a very big success, shared a lot of that with other departments around the country. And the thing was that I was writing this book, but I was gaining new insight every year. As I made new mistakes, I would learn something new, and I'd go, oh, well, now I need to adjust that, and that actually tied to that. So it was taking me forever to write this leadership book because I wanted it to be real. The problem is that I wasn't being authentic I wasn't putting in my personal experiences. And so when I made some pretty big mistakes in my personal life towards the end of my career, 2019 to be exact, it led to my termination. I lost my career. I lost my identity, and I went to a really dark place. And I had to take control and make things right. I had to use those experiences and make something good out of it, which I initially could not see a way of doing that. But as you push through, as you keep on pushing through, you learn things. And I came back to my book and I said, well, here it is. This is my opportunity to be real, to be authentic, to share all of my big mistakes and what I did to overcome them. What were the most important lessons that I learned? And one of the biggest lessons was that I am not my career. That is not I really had to dig deep and figure out who in the world I was, because for 23 years I was, this firefighter guy that, I would take vacation to go do fire department training. It's like ridiculous. But I'm not the only one that does that. It's very common, in all kinds of different fields. People are consumed with their career, and that becomes their identity. The reality is that who we are, what drives us, is, I feel like we're all in this pursuit of well-being, happiness, like this pure sense of fulfillment. And the only time that I've ever experienced that, and the way that I explain this is, if you imagine, your child coming to you with something that they want to achieve and they're not very good at it, but you keep on working with them and you keep on working with them. And finally, one day you're looking out the window and you see your child attempting this very thing that you were teaching them, and they do it, and they do it perfect. And you can see the pride on their face. And it's like, you invested all that in them so that they could experience that pride. And that sense of fulfillment, I think, is the purest form of fulfillment. When you invest yourself into making somebody else better, I don't, and I feel that that very concept is examined throughout history in writings of history's greatest thinkers. We're all here for one another.
Absolutely.
To give of ourselves to the people that we care about, to our communities, to add value to those around us. And I really think that if you keep that in the front of your mind as your purpose, as your goal, as what drives you, it doesn't matter your career field. Use whatever job you're in or whatever occupation you have as an expression of that purpose.
Yeah, I think you hit on something that's really important, and a lot of people do this, where this idea you have to separate your identity from what you do. And we see this all the time, because if what you do goes away, you're in a bad place. It was like in circles that I walk in, we call it the Brett Favre syndrome, where people, and they have a hard time making, like, for example, they have a hard time making decisions to sell the business, even though that's the right decision, but because that's where their identity is. And they see themselves as this particular business owner, and if they sell it, deep down, it's like, okay, who am I now? So can you talk more about that? I just think that's so critical for people to be able to separate their identity from what they do. Well,
it's that age-old question of who am I?
Mm-hmm.
And it came. I was reading about. I was reading Stoic philosophy, and there was a book that I was reading that referenced the Oracle at Delphi, and the temple there. There's all these columns. I believe there's like 65 or 68 maxims that are there at the temple at the Oracle at Delphi. But the very main one in the entryway, at the very top, it's the number one maxim, is know thyself. So this is like ancient wisdom. And I don't think that we invest enough time to really know who we are, So I have some exercises in the book that kind of explore that to help people discover who they really are, what their core values are, when their career goes away, when their health goes away, when they lose everything, what's left? Are they just a shell of a person, Well, if they haven't done the work to figure out who they are, then I would imagine that's how it's going to feel. But the reality is that we're much deeper than that, and if we can discover our purpose for ourselves, the book A Man's Search for Meaning by Viktor Frankl, he talks about that, our purpose, and each person has to figure out their own purpose. And so, does that do justice to the question?
No, I think that's huge. I mean, the whole, and I don't think it's simple but not easy, right? I think it can be a process. You may have to have outside help. Maybe it's another coach, it's a mentor to really help you to get clarity on that. But I just think that's so important. So you were talking about like some of the challenges with writing the book. If I'm not mistaken, it's like over a 10-year span, or about a 10-year span, right? That it took you.
Yeah. It was just that I felt like I needed to be this leadership expert. And the reality is that I was teaching leadership, most days. There was the Leadership Academy that, we were doing leadership courses for the new probationary firefighters when they got hired. I was going and speaking to other departments, but it was a process of professional development. So I could speak pretty intelligently on what it means to be a leader. There was a big portion of my coursework for my master's degree that was about leadership and emotional intelligence and all this. But when I was writing the book, it didn't feel right. Maybe there's a little bit of that imposter syndrome kind of deal, like, people are going to read this and be able to see right through it. I don't know what I'm talking about, but it was because I kept on learning lessons. And I think that's the biggest thing, is that as a leader, you've got to be open to those lessons. Don't ever think that you know it all. Be humble enough to accept some growth opportunities. Don't be afraid to fail, because I think there's people out there that, they don't want to step out of their comfort zone because they're safe and they don't want to mess up and be viewed as a failure. So part of being a leader is being courageous. So all these lessons, I'm learning along the way, and I'm writing, and it just, it wasn't until I dug deep and really figured out who I was and what was important to me that I was able to finish the book. And I actually scrapped most of the original manuscript and wrote everything within a month, just poured out my heart, and found an amazing editor that was able to cut it down to 150 pages because it was big. But the I would say the best parts of it are there in the book. And so yeah, it was tough, but it was when I made that decision to really bear all and be authentic, and because I think that's what people will connect with, and that was what made me feel good about the book.
Yeah, and I think that's a lesson for speakers in all walks, speakers, authors. I think when you get to the point where you're telling your authentic story, I think that makes a big difference, and that's when things can change for you. So what do you hope is the biggest takeaway that people get out of the book?
If you view something as a failure, I believe that you need to shift your mindset. Allow that experience to refine you, not define you. There was I want to say it was like a Navy SEAL book or something. I don't remember exactly which book it was, but it was something about, you're never out of the fight unless you're dead. And if you have that mindset that no matter how many times you get knocked down, at least you're in the fight if you keep getting up. And that's how we're going to achieve things that we didn't know we could achieve, by pushing the envelope, by stepping out of our comfort zone. As long as we have that purpose, a purpose of, I don't know, service to others, if we have that as what's driving us to do bigger and better things, to add value to others, I feel like that is something worth getting up for,
Making it all about service and really having the right perspective on failure. It's interesting. I never forget that Michael Jordan commercial when it came out, where he talks about all the shots he missed. He talks about, all the times he's counted on to hit the game-winning shot and he missed. He says, I've failed over and over again in my life, and that's why I succeed. So I think it's you probably see this. Maybe you can talk to this, but the people that are at a higher level of success are failing more.
Yeah.
Than the typical person. Let's talk about that.
Yeah, I mean, I actually think that I talk about it in my book too. I mean, if you look throughout history's greatest leaders, the people that are in our history books, the people that read biographies about, those people made huge mistakes. But what they did was they got back up, and they were bold. I think their intentions were good, and maybe when their intentions were bad, that's maybe the source of their failure, and they were like, oh, well, I better not do that again. But they kept on getting up, and they did some amazing things because they were in the arena. They were doing the work.
No, that's great. That's great. So now, our entrepreneurs, they're rushing out to get the book. But what steps can they take to transform their failure into fuel? What are some specific things they can do? They've got this failure, but they want to turn it into fuel. How do they transform that?
It's all about shifting the mindset, finding out what's important to you. You got to do the work. You got to dig deep and find out who you are at the core, and define that for yourself. Set goals. Without goals, I mean, there's no direction. Without direction, you're just kind of floating dead in the water. You've got to have goals. You've got to have purpose, and you've got to know what's driving you. If everything goes away, what's going to keep you going? Like if everything that's important to you right now goes away, what's going to make you get up and keep pushing on? And that's part of the work so at the end of each chapter, except for the last chapter, there's little exercises, and then there's a free downloadable workbook that expands those exercises that people can plan out, set, build a strategy, a grand strategy for their life. And what it does is it kind of lays out all these different paths. If you know where you want to be at the end of the day, at the end of your life, when you're looking back on everything, and you know how you want to feel about yourself, and you want to look at the things that you've achieved, and you can find so many different paths. You might not use this car to get there. That car might break down, and you might have to jump in a truck or get out on foot. There's all these different avenues to get to the same place. So, sometimes people set out thinking that they're going to spend their adult life in a particular career, finance, law enforcement, being an attorney, medicine, whatever. People shift all the time. And it's really finding out how to use the occupation that you're in, or which occupation you're able to best use to express your purpose.
Yeah, and as I recall, when we talked before, I think maybe when I was on your show, you have an exercise in your book similar to mine where people map out, kind of see themselves as an older person and kind of look back and say, okay, well, what did I accomplish? What are people saying? I take it you find that to be a very effective way to get people to think about what their purpose is.
Yeah. So there's so many different exercises like that, but it's all about reflection. In my book, I have the exercise where you write out your eulogy. You write it out as if you died tomorrow, and then you write it out as if you died, an old person that has achieved everything they want to achieve. What are people going to say about you? And if you really are honest with yourself and distill it down, then I think you'll be able to figure some things out for yourself that maybe you had never thought of.
Yeah, I think another place to look too is to look at your personal challenges and things that you've overcome. Like you losing your career and having to separate your identity and having to overcome, because it's not like you're somebody just spitting out theory, right? You're talking in your book, you're talking about things you actually had to do.
Yeah.
So I think there's a sense of purpose from that. Some things you've overcome, now you're equipped to help someone else.
Yes. Yeah. I've been coaching that for a while. I mean, even when I was working as a battalion chief, as a lieutenant, I was helping the people that I was working with develop professionally and, personally. Because you got to develop as a person if you're going to succeed professionally. That's my opinion, anyways. I mean, you can be like successful financially, but how miserable are you if you're like screwing your personal life up? And that financial freedom will go away if you screw up your personal life. I can tell you that.
All right. So we're talking to Dave Hollenbach, who's the author of this great book called Fireproof. So Ted, were you about to jump in and say something?
Yeah, it's interesting. I had a contact that said to me one time, he said, Ted, do you ever think about quitting? I think I mentioned that to you before, Eric. He said, are you afraid that the people that we know will think you are a failure? And it was so much that was in that when I unpacked it. I'm like, man, like one, I'm, man, my faith and my work ethic, I'm not going to quit. I'm not even concerned about failing. Right. But then I'm definitely not concerned about others thinking I'm a failure. Right. Because I got to live with me. Right. I got to live with me, and I have to figure it out. And you'd be so surprised that as you continue to push through things, how much you have more admirers, right? More people that that are getting a benefit from your journey than you have those that are, looking at you and expecting you to fail.
Oh, absolutely.
I think it's important for us to, those that have experienced some serious failure, that to not necessarily prevent others from making the same mistakes, because the lessons learned in those failures are huge. But to be the person that helps them up, give them a hand up, dust them off, and say, hey, what'd you learn from this?
That's right.
That's going to serve you for the rest of your life. Now you're better. Keep pushing on. You're not done.
That's right.
So here's something interesting, right? This just came to me. During my time, at one point I was a district manager. I had like I'd have like 17 locations, and every now and then, like I'd have this guy, he's like a young hotshot, and he's telling me how I should do this and that, and then he's gonna leave, and I'm thinking to myself, you know what? He just needs to go and fail. And I've seen it several times. They leave for greener grass. I try to tell them, look, you want to consider X, Y, and Z. They don't listen to me, but then they come back humbled, right?
Yeah.
When they go somewhere else. And I've just seen that a lot, where sometimes people they need that humbling experience in that seasoning. So maybe talk to that a little bit.
That was very important for my growth. You know, there was several instances where, I mean, I was very successful. I did some really cool stuff in my career. A lot of people looked at me as, somebody that they wanted to be like. And I'd be lying if I told you it didn't go to my head a little bit. I mean, I was on top of my game, and I kind of felt like, I had the world by the short hairs. I was doing everything that I was supposed to do,
Right.
and man, I just didn't have things dialed in my personal life, and it destroyed my professional career. And then all those people that were looking up to me, like, oh, I want to be like that guy. Yeah, that was very humbling. So it's one of those things that I try and keep in the front of my head now is be humble or be humbled. Do the work. Let your actions speak for themselves. You don't have to, sing your own praises. Others will do that for you if you're doing what you're supposed to be doing.
That's true.
For sure. Yeah, I think that it requires a combination. I think there's a level of confidence that you need to have, but at the same time, there's a level of humility that you have to have as well. You need to be open to feedback and understand that you don't always know everything. I think that blend is critical. So let's talk about your podcast, From Embers to Excellence. So what will people gain by tuning in to your show?
Well, I interview leaders from all walks of life. I interview mental health professionals. I interview business leaders, consultants, people that are coaching high-level executives. What do these people do to help executives achieve excellence? These are guys that are coaching people in the E-suites and the C-suites. And so I interview those people, but I also interview people from the fire service, from law enforcement, from the military, quite a few special operations people that retired from the Navy SEALs, Marine Corps Force Recon, Army Delta Force. There's all these amazing people, and they share their experiences, but they share. What I try and do is cut to the quick, and find out what it is that really drives them. What are some of the most important lessons that they've learned, and how can those lessons benefit the people that are listening? So, what are they doing on a daily basis to stay at that level? Because you got to continue to work, or you just deteriorate. You can't just sit back on your laurels, right? So, there's nuggets in every episode, and there's some serious conversations, some funny ones. There's, I don't know, just a lot of interesting people that I talk to. So I try and mix it up, because one of the things that I do is I support some nonprofits that cater to veterans and first responders that are struggling with PTSD. So that's why I talk to mental health professionals and people that have been there and done that. And they specialize in PTSD. So that's something that I'm pretty passionate about. So I like to talk to people about that. So you never know what you're going to get, but you can look through the catalog of all the episodes and kind of pick and choose. It's not like you have to listen to them in order.
No, that's fantastic. I mean, and your show is ranking very well. I understand it's what in the top 10% of the globe according to Listen Notes.
Yeah, I'm pushing towards the top 5%. That's what I'm shooting for. I think I'm pretty close now, but I don't know what my listen score's got to be to hit that. But I feel like I'm pretty close. So.
Yeah, that's awesome. And congratulations. I mean, you mentioned the whole PTSD thing. I mean, if there's somebody that's struggling with that now, I mean, what steps should they take?
Well, one thing that they could do, I have a resources page that it's focused towards mental health resources for veterans and first responders, but there is information there for everybody. There's hotlines that you can call. I try and put something there for anybody that wants to educate themselves on PTSD. Maybe they have a loved one that's struggling with it. How can they help them? How can they be supportive of them? How could they encourage them to go get some help? Because I think a lot of times in public safety, the answer that the departments give you is like, okay, you're struggling here, go to EAP, the Employee Assistance Program. But most of those therapists, and I'm speaking from experience and from the experience of everybody that I've talked to about EAP, is that most of the time those therapists are not trained to help veterans and first responders with PTSD. So I have like interview questions there on my website that you can download, and it's to interview the therapist, make sure that there's somebody that is qualified to help you overcome those symptoms of PTSD. It's not hopeless. There's a lot of resources and there's a lot of good people out there that are helping those that are struggling.
Yeah, no, definitely people need to pick your book up. I'm not aware of anybody else doing that, providing interview questions to ask. No, I think that's a huge benefit for people that may be struggling with that. Okay. Fantastic. So we're now at the part of the segment is called Write This Down. And this is where we each go around and we share at least one takeaway, could be more, that we want people to remember from this episode that they need to write down so they can level up. So Dave, you are our guest of honor. What do you want our entrepreneurs to write down from this episode?
Be humble or be humbled. It's not about you if you're a leader. It's about the people that you're leading. And if you push to add value to those individuals, that's how you can measure your success, is by the success of the people that you are leading and that you are serving.
All right. Fantastic. Hopefully everybody wrote that down. Awesome. Okay, Ted.
Yeah, tough one to follow. I think I'm looking at it from an entrepreneur side. It's you look at it from it's your vision, right? It's your vision. So it's either gonna live or die with you, right? So you need to continue to push through it. Like you said, Dave. You'll fall. You got to get back up. Yeah, I mean it's your vision. So you have to see it through if it's gonna make it. Yeah, and so for anyone that's an entrepreneur, you definitely need to know that there's going to be ups and downs in any journey, right? And every journey is there's your journey. So Dave's journey might have happened a certain way, and Eric's journey had to happen a certain way, but Ted's journey is Ted's journey. So once you have that vision, that journey, be prepared for that journey and everything that goes with that journey in order for that vision to become a reality.
Oh, that's great. That is great. All right. So for me, I'm just reminded, we're talking about failure. I'm reminded I heard this this interview with Sarah Blakely. She is the CEO of Spanx, founder of Spanx, the undergarments, and she's a billionaire. And she mentioned that when she was growing up at the dinner table, how her father, they would go around the table and you had to say something that you failed at, like every day. And he wouldn't let you off the hook until you said something that you failed at. Oh, you know what? I got a B on the test. I was hoping to get an A. So you had to say something, but that helped her to have the right perspective on failure. And so the key is, one of the best ways to get better is to fail faster, right? So if you have the right perspective on your failure, you can get better faster. So write that down. One of the best ways to get better is to fail faster. All right. So Nancy, we're all ready to use failure as our fuel and take this thing to a whole other level. We can go, Ted, we can go from embers to excellence.
That's right. That's right. That's right. That's right.
That's right. That's a great title for a podcast. Mm-hmm. So Dave, how can the people best connect with you to get your book?
You can go to my website, hollenbachleadership.com. And I have the Fireproof store on my website. You can see all of my podcast episodes on my website. All my social media is there. So, yeah, hollenbachleadership.com. Right now, that is the only place you can get a copy of my book. The publisher has scheduled the official release for October 11th of this year. So you can pre-order your book on Amazon if that's what you want to do. That would help out my best-selling status when it finally releases.
That's right.
But if you want a signed copy, just order through the website.
Fantastic. I mean, again, can you put the website out there one more time for the people that might have just logged on?
hollenbachleadership.com. HOLLEN, B as in boy, ACH, leadership.com.
hollenbachleadership.com. All right. We certainly want to thank Dave Hollenbach for sharing everything he shared and inspiring us to turn our failure into fuel. And speaking of sharing, don't forget to share the show.
Share the show. Share the show.
That's right. Don't just keep this episode to yourself. Share it with the people in your network. That way they can have the right perspective on failure. And don't forget that this, again, you can listen to this on Apple Podcasts. You can listen to this on Spotify as well, and wherever else you like to listen on the podcasting platforms. So that's our show for this week. Again, thank you, Dave, for being our guest. And until next time, have a great one.
Have a great one.
Thank you, Ted. Thank you, Eric.
You're welcome. Thank you.